Hey, thank you for joining me again for this post-season review. I do have to say thank you for your hospitality over the championship weekend. Great catching up with you in person. Incredible location for games, and your facilities are top notch. But thanks for doing this today.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you having me, and it was good to meet you in person as well. I'm glad you could make it down and see the event and see our facilities as well. So proud and pleased for the opportunity for anybody to see them.
I have to say my favorite vantage point to watch the game were those Adirondack chairs at the one end on the hill, and you're overlooking. That was sharp.
That's a section that's got it's behind our student center, so you can essentially pick up some food and sit back there. I'm always trying to. I think they're in our attendance numbers up there, even if they are just catching dinner afterwards.
I think they count. Anybody, you're right. They can see the game.
Sure.
Hey, let's just run right into it. Give me a sense as to how you thought your season went. You went 10-7-2, and we'll talk in greater detail. But like, how do you think it went? Were you satisfied? Were your expectations higher?
Yeah, I mean, this was a challenging season. I'll say it that way, and I could look at it in two ways. With high levels of kind of excitement, or like meeting goals, and then like some frustrations to the season as well. I feel like maybe I'm surprised I still got this hair on my head after this season. It was just a challenge, and I feel like it aged me. I've done this a long time, and this one aged me maybe more than others. As I say that, we had a lot of fifth-year guys come back, and talented fifth-year guys come back. So there was certainly a high sense of like ambition. Not that it's not always like that, but like a high sense of ambition as far as what the group kind of wanted to accomplish, and just like what we expected ourselves as well. Had a hard schedule, put together purposefully a challenging schedule for the group, and so from the challenges standpoint, the early goings of the season, results wise, sort of didn't cut our way, and from that standpoint, there was like a lot of challenges that come along with that, as you could imagine for any program that if you're not catching results, it throws curveballs or things your way. So that part was challenging. The way our resilience was, and the way that we came out of it, and the way that we ended the season, I couldn't be more proud and pleased. And so when you look at it in those two ways, I can take a tremendous amount from the season and the way that we finished, and really be proud of it. And to the guys' credit as well, I give all the credit to them. This group was the most resilient group I've seen, especially given the ambitions and the expectations, and sort of how we had to grind through them early to be able to run later in the season. And the gutting part at the end for us was we lose 2-1 in the conference final to W&L in a match that I think we played very well in, and I think could have gone easily either way. And I felt like we had games ahead of us if we can get there. The problem was we just didn't do enough in the early part of the season to at-large ourselves into the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that was a little frustrating. But overall, again, I think not a tale of two seasons, but definitely challenging, but then had some reward to it as well.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I noticed, and we'll talk a little bit more about the statistics. One of the other things, I noticed so much in those things. It's remarkable. But like you definitely had strength of schedule on your side, right? Like that was you were definitely strong enough. But there was one stat that jumped out at me, which is like, it doesn't matter because you can't make it happen. You were 0 for 6 against ranked teams. Now I didn't know if that meant ranked nationally or regionally or what, but it was like 0-6, and I'm like, you got to carry a couple of those somehow.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially with the ties now being a thing.
Yep.
We didn't need to win them all, but we needed to be a 500 in that number, and then I think we have a legit shout. But 0-6 versus regionally ranked opponents is what that number was.
Yeah.
Not going to do it, and we knew it's not going to do it. We had to pick up more of those games, and Yeah, so that was kind of a challenge of the season as well. That
Mm-hmm.
like not only would we needed to pick them up, but we needed to pick up the right two
Yeah.
wins or two ties. And again, I don't feel like we were that far off. But when you don't get the results, obviously you got to
Yeah.
question and look as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah,
Do you think I mean, did anything or did that surprise you? Not the tale of two seasons, but how you were able to sort of morph into that second half of the season that surprised you about this
um,
team, or is there something else?
again, I surprised me in the way of, well, didn't surprise me in the way of we have a competitive group that I think is capable of winning games. Like I believe that the whole time, like talented, competitive group. But like if I'm talking internally about our group, their resilience to like drop some of those results early, some of the bigger games early. I mean, you think the two first who came out regionally ranked at the end and NCAA tournament teams that we played um, was Mary Washington Catholic in the first 5 games of the season, and we dropped both those results. And like those are games that we know are going to be very challenging. We put on the schedule intentionally, but for our like confident group to drop those games and to not go like, oh, season's over,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't win them, and like for us to just keep moving on and plugging along. Um, Again, I thought we had it in us, but then to actually show is still like, makes me proud. And like, I think we kept pushing on past us and sticking
Yeah.
to sort of some goals that we set before the season, which are hard to come back off of
Yeah.
once you're rolling, which are let's get better every day. Let's try to
Yeah.
reach our potential by the end. Some of our fifth year guys even came with some goals internally
Mm-hmm.
and throughout the team that just happened to say like, let's just make sure we're having fun throughout the season. Don't let it overwhelm us. Like we came back.
Yeah.
Easy to say during
Yeah.
preseason when we're having team meetings and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but when you're hitting those games and the results aren't going your way,
Yeah.
it becomes much more challenging. So
Yeah.
again, if we had to do it all over again, we kind of tinkered or drastically changed some things tactically in about the midway point, and it
Mm-hmm.
seemed to pay a lot of dividends for us. Maybe we figured that out a little bit earlier. Some of those early versus bigger games, if you will. Maybe I think we can take, but I thought we were capable of them either way. It just didn't go our way. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'll say that
Mm.
to that originally ranked issue that we
Yeah.
had this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just looking at your. I mean, look, and they were not easy games, right? You know, Catholics a handful. Mary Washington. What are you going to say about Mary
Yep.
Washington? Virginia Wesleyan and Washington and Lee. Those are four losses right there. Those are not. Those aren't by
Yeah.
any stretch of the means. Is like, do I think you're a terrible team because you lost to those four? Or
Yeah.
that
Right.
those are. You know what I mean? And then what? Lynchburg and Emory. Yeah, I think maybe those last two, right? And Lynchburg was really good this year, and
Yep.
so. But yeah, those two of those games turn you on a dime, right? Like you suddenly
For
looks at
sure.
very different. It's a very different Roanoke season than it was. Let me ask you the question that your boss is always going to ask you, or that's a boss like question. I'm not a boss. I don't know why, but the question I like to ask is, how do you think you were as a coach?
Oh man. Uh,
We can
I
we
would.
can clip this if you want.
No, I think I
Oh,
can
look,
speak
the
to this.
audio is getting all
It's
bad.
funny. I'll be honest with you. My boss, who was my former coach and is just announced his retirement from being the athletic director at
Oh
Roanoke
wow.
College, uh, told me that he thought this was my best job ever. That
Oh
being
wow.
said, I felt that it was my worst job ever. If I'm being honest with you,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, I felt like this was I wouldn't say my worst job ever, but my toughest job ever.
yeah,
The
yeah.
most challenging. Again, dealing with like just expectations that weren't met, especially early in the season from our group. And I think that, like, again, I'm really pleased and proud of the players that resolve to come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that I think we did very well. We trained our 3-5-2 last spring in the thought that we might use it, but we didn't enter the season with it. We went to Spain in a preseason trip. We didn't really use it there either. So maybe I was late to the party on having the courage to flip the system, which when we did, we won out, I think, 9 out of our last 11 games or 8 out of our
Mm-hmm.
last 10 games, something like that. So from that standpoint, I can look at myself kind of either way with that. Like maybe have the courage to figure it out earlier, or potentially, um, you know, credit myself for saying like this is what we got to do to keep the thing moving and get to where we want to be at. So yeah, I guess I could look at that either way. Rating myself, I mean, I'm always going to take the hardest criticism that anyone can give. That's I think the nature of a coach, and me personally is like it does come down to when results aren't there to me
Yeah.
and what we can do. And so in that result, 7 losses and not winning those big games comes to me. But again,
Yeah.
I do think we were able to steer the ship. I give a lot of credit to the staff as well. I got my right hand man sitting to my right side right here, Sheldon Blue, one of our assistants. Just like my assistant crew did a fantastic job with our guys, my leadership group, to keep it moving and get to the point where we were at the end of the season, which I felt very strongly about.
Yeah, I would just say, like, to your point, it, you were close, you know? Like, none of these games are blowout games to me. Like, your one goal differences, and I don't know the situations except for Catholic, but that, yeah. It's almost like you were there, right? And you were right there. All right, so what do you where what do you think is up? What's sort of your thinking now for next season? All right, especially since you transitioned now, or you experience that transition from in how you play and sort of the
Yep.
results there. I mean, is it something that now you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do, or is it you're going to double down on what you know and what you've sort of been playing for so long?
I mean, I think stick to the guns as far as this, like culturally, the way that we run the program. Somebody, if they were to ask us what our identity is, maybe we were searching a little bit on the field, but like in terms of like culture and like the way that we go about our business, what we ask of the guys, I don't think that like necessarily changes too much because at the end of their careers, they're still coming in here and going great experiences, like uh, proud to be part of the program. Like, the feedback that we're getting, we're graduating big classes. We're not
Yep.
we're not rotating through players. Guys are developing during their time here, enjoying their experiences. Like culturally, I think like there's things that we take that will persist. I do. I mean, and the stats are kind of that we keep are kind of evident to it. Like I'm always trying to pick up things that will be like persistent each year and like developed on, and then new things that either consistent or continuous improvement and learning. Specifically, I think like my own personal like ability to maybe adapt system will be, I don't know, maybe be a little bit more willing to take risk. This was a little bit of feedback we all came together with at the end of last season. Was like, hey, maybe we need to like find a ways to like not be fearful of taking a little bit of risk in certain moments. And I think that we did that successfully, especially towards the end of the season, in mostly in just through changing the system that we played. Um, Midway through the season. So I think we'll be a little bit more like willing to work to what fits our personnel as opposed to try to like punch them into certain things. That being said, I also think like the way that we play, it doesn't really change all that dramatically in either system. It was just a matter of like, where the players lined up and like how they
Yeah.
felt about that and some like combinations and things like that too. So again, probably same thing we've always done, which is take positives, continue them, build them into the culture on and off the field, and then like find ways of continuous improvement. And yeah, I mean, I could go deeper into it, but it's essentially like we got better with the ball as the season went on this year. Like we were able to like I'm not going to use the word dominate, but put our stamp on the game with the ball at our feet as the season went on.
Yeah.
I would say my early teams at Roanoke were very like were a lot more like that, okay? But we were like losing big games back in 13, 14, 15, and 16 to we'd have all the ball, we'd lose on two restarts in the
Yeah.
big games, in the big
Yeah.
ones, okay?
Yeah.
So there was some adaptation, I think, for me as a coach and for our program through 17, 18, 19, which culminated into a great season in 17 and in 19. 19, we got the at-large bid into the NCAA tournament. Had a fantastic season, and it wasn't that we were poor with the ball, but we were like a little risk adverse in terms of how we played. Like we weren't
Yeah.
going to put ourselves in too much problems, especially in the defensive or midfield third with the
Yeah.
ball. And I think that kind of bit us last year with our ability to, I use the word dominate. I'm not saying that we dominated anyone, but be on the front foot with the ball
Yeah.
in the not big games. Okay, so
Yeah.
we tied some games that I thought I think we got more guys than they got, and
Uh-huh.
tied or lost some games last season that, I'm thinking we ought to be able to break these guys down with the ball, and we're not doing it. Again, it's on me. So we had a last spring was about how can we get goals in the run of play.
Yeah.
How can we rest on the ball? How can we uh, find more ways in those games when teams are sitting deeper on us to make sure that we come out with results
Yeah.
through a bunch of things. I think that did come true this year. I mean, we were able to find goals in those types of games. It flipped back again though to now where the big game goes, where it's a margin of a restart goal was the ones that we like the margin of a
Yeah.
restart goal being the difference. I think flipped back again. So kind of balance of both, long-winded
Yeah.
way of saying continue
Yeah.
to improve.
Yeah. That's hard. Like it is funny. Like, hey, it's like if I flip this lever, the other lever flips down. You're right, and you're just trying to like, okay, no, this one, and get the perfect combination, which is always, I mean, that's the rub, right? Like, how do you adjust one thing to be better in that area without being neglectful in another area? And
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's it. That's the nature of the beast. All right. Let me ask you some rule changes, or about the rule changes. So, and you only had two ties, so I'm just curious about the no overtime. Do I mean, do you have any thoughts on it? Do you think it was an issue for you, or do you
I,
think? Yeah, go. I'll
I
leave
don't
it there
like
for.
it. I didn't like the switch. I voted against it for whatever our votes were worth when they at
Uh
least
huh.
asked us what we were thinking through survey.
Yeah.
I like the overtimes. I think it's maybe uniquely college soccer, and so I think when we had to break it to our guys, the changes, they were like, what are we doing here, coach?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what do you can't be serious. I was a little bit surprised that at least in terms of ours, we've had some like crazy tie seasons when even when we had the overtime. So it was
Right.
probably some of the data that helped them allow the people who wanted it to push it through. I mean, we had
Right.
5 ties, I think, last season. And we've had
Yeah.
a couple other seasons. We had like 4 in league one year,
Yeah.
So to have less in a year where there wasn't any overtime, uh, kind of surprising to me. I'm waiting for somebody. I'm not going to be the guy to do this because have already worn myself thin and our staff thin with the data that we collect on ourselves and our opponents. But I am anxious to see whoever does it, whether there was more ties this year, like
Mm-hmm.
to take everything and see if there was more
Yeah.
ties this year.
Yeah.
But again, I was sort of against the rule change, and I still would stick to that now. I would prefer to have played overtimes. I understand the NCAA is trying to say, or whoever, player safety. I get that. I mean, I think there's some other setups that they allow us to play in or have us playing in Division Three that aren't in consideration of that anyway. So
Yeah.
to play 20 more minutes to give these guys an experience to find a winner, I think, or players to find a winner that I'd rather have it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, one of the things I talked to Coach Brandon Bianco at Denison as you're traveling there,
yeah,
Denison,
we're
and
going to
then
open up
yeah,
there next year.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's part of that rules committee in the NCAA. I don't know what's it called, but we had talked a little bit about expanding the season by 10 to 12 days. So you get to report a week earlier, the tournament starts a week later, and now is that something that you could get behind? I'm more curiosity. Like,
Yeah.
you think that helps more than no overtimes?
I would be 100% in favor of any of that, any additional stuff that we could get in terms
Mm-hmm.
of time. with our
Yeah.
players in our extension of the season. I mean, I think
Hmm.
preseason time for sure. Obviously, you're going to battle against trying to find 420 some odd schools that all have to incur
Hmm.
that budget increase to have players on
Yeah.
campus
Yeah.
for more time. I mean, I think that's probably the deciding factor more than anything, honestly,
Yeah.
against it. But yeah, more time to just expand the season so you're not the games aren't jammed in. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to get the games. It's hard to get enough games and not put yourself in like a really challenging situation. And until this year, even to the Final Four, with the exception of the Final Four that they gave that day rest, you're still the comeback's always going to be well. When you're in the tournament, you're going to play back to back anyway. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what's the deal about doing it early? But there's some seasons where we'll play 5 games in like 8 days to start the year if we're playing
Yeah.
tournament, midweek tournament. You
Yeah.
have to get those tournaments on the weekend in order to play
Yeah.
the teams we need to play and get the games we need to get in before our conference
Yeah.
starts. So yeah, I'm in favor of anything that stretches the season. I mean, I doubt this will. There is some talk about. I think I'm not on the rules committee. This isn't my
Yeah.
soapbox per se, but um, uh, giving us more days in the spring or like expanding it between the two
Yeah.
will never be the two season model that Division
Yeah.
One is going after. But yeah, I would appreciate more days in the spring and a little bit more
Yeah.
time in the fall if we could
So
get that.
yeah.
I'd really love an extra exhibition in the spring. I mean, I think that would do wonders for us. I'd actually cut a couple practices if we could get one more opportunity to play outside competition in the
Yeah. Yeah.
spring.
All right. That's interesting. I got to look at the spring. I never concentrate on this spring because I always thought it was you get a few weeks, you get a couple games, and
Yeah,
that's it. And I never thought about the importance of the springtime. That I will say it is interesting. I looked at a Mount Union. I looked at their schedule and I said, "Oh, what if you had a week extra time?" And I stretched
yeah,
it out, and I was surprised at how much more spread out your game schedule ends up being. Where you suddenly drop, I think it was like 3 midweek games because you have now the time to sort of do on the just
yeah,
weekend to weekend,
yep,
and and I think you actually get maybe an extra week. Like I forget how it ended up working out, but I was like, man, it's not just the fact that you're adding 5 days or 7 days of what I did. It's sort of the flexibility now that you have within
yeah,
your calendar because you don't, like you said, you don't right now. You don't have that flexibility.
yep,
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't play enough games and your strength of schedule isn't there, you're not going to make the tournament,
yep.
right? And then if you fill up your calendar to with the strength of schedule, you run the real risk.
Better be, you better be deep. You better be
Yeah,
deep. You better stay uninjured,
yeah, yeah. Because
and everything else will fall in place.
by mid season, you could have a team, half of your team in the training room, right? Like
Yeah,
that's just the nature of it, and I think that's to me the big thing is just the adding is nice, but the flexibility is even nicer. Yeah, you can really go gung ho that first couple weeks in the fall, and then just taper yourself throughout and think, okay, I got to get to tournament time. What's my best way to do it? And so, I don't know. I was really how thought out it was. I really like the idea. I think it would be really helpful, and I don't think it would be that much more expensive because, right, the two season model is out. I mean, that's not even
yeah.
realistic to talk about, right?
Yeah, I don't see that happen in Division
No,
Three, but yeah,
no.
maybe a little bit of time on the back end or some on the front end. I think
Yeah,
the front end costs a little bit more just because you're
right,
not
right.
in school yet.
You're not in school. That's exactly what I thought. Like, oh, what's
Yeah,
the problem? Oh, it's another week, and so what does
yeah.
that equate to? But yeah. All right. One question I didn't ask you: who's going to win the World Cup?
Ooh, this is a good one. This heck of a game. France, England, France, um, Brazil, Brazil.
Okay.
We'll stay
Boo.
there. Yeah.
We're done with this interview.
It's been amazing. I was so anti change it from the summer till
Oh,
now until Thanksgiving holiday week.
yeah.
Other than other than being on the road recruiting on the Saturdays, Fridays, Saturdays,
Yeah.
Sundays each time, and trying to watch games on your phone. The weekday, wake up at 7, watch the first game, head into the office, watch the second game at 10, and then catch the matinee at 2. It's been amazing, and the games have been amazing.
I've been I'm a bad sleeper. So I can wake up at just random times and just be like, I'm up. And so waking up at 5 in the morning to catch the first game, has
It's
been.
awesome.
I
Yeah,
watched some good games with coffee in the morning.
very good.
All right, can you talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious. Again, it's, you got a stacked. The ODAC is pretty stacked, although it's weird in how you do your scheduling. I mean that respectfully, but um, like, and you made it to the ODAC final against Washington and Lee, 2-1, close. Like, what? Can you just talk about that game? How you think you guys were doing? What? I mean, did you? And I'm this is Washington and Lee, right? I'm giving them a ton of credit because I think
Yeah,
they're
sure.
outstanding soccer, and Coach Singleton does a great job. But like, like, how in it do you think you were?
I mean, again, I'll be real honest. Trent, on the day, I think it was like I'd say a very even game that the kind of margins were thin and could have gone either way. Um, yeah, so I think we were every bit in the match, and uh, yeah, I think we did some good things, and they're to your point. I mean, I give them a ton of respect. It's not
Hmm.
overselling what they've been able to
No,
do,
not at all.
both in our league and then also nationally.
Yeah.
Each year, they are very good and challenging to play against. I'll say this: we've beaten them with a lot less of the game in our favor in the last 5 years, and we've had draws with them where a lot less of the game was in our favor,
Yeah.
than the final was this year.
Yeah.
And they've also given it to us, a couple times as well. So it's always a great battle. Um, what I thought we were able to do, I mean, they make it hard to play in terms of they press really well. Um, and they have fantastic attacking players. And it's not, I mean, I don't want to give the whole scatter report on them to the rest of the country, but their risk reward with the ball and their defensive third they're pretty calculated with what they're doing to get it into
Yeah.
your end, and they put you under a lot of pressure in that way. I mean, they'll
Hmm.
drop diagonals on you until you show that you can handle it or you stretch. And if you do that, then they'll find central players or
Yeah.
wide players to join forward. So in that way, it just creates a bunch of challenges. And I think in some of the previous matches that we have played against them, we've been tremendous in our like defensive third defending, and we've gone at it in that way.
Hmm.
Uh, like gritty and tried to like expose them maybe a little bit more for like their balance in the back. Sometimes to with success and sometimes without
Yeah. Yeah.
success to like counter and like when they're throwing numbers forward. That's a large task to even defend them even with guys behind the ball. This year, again, we kind of came on this mid-season where let's live and die a little bit with the ball at our feet, maybe more so than trying to
Hmm.
defend and sort of hang in maybe that specific game. And I thought we were able to do that. We were able to like play through their pressure a lot more, and we were able to I don't want to call wear the pressure out, but I definitely felt pretty good in the last 20 minutes of the first half, and then moments in the second half as well in that final where we were able to do what we wanted with the ball a little bit more
Hmm.
so than maybe in other games. And so, yeah, I think that was effective for us. Again, like it came down to, I would say a pretty special moment from them with 30 seconds left to find the winner. But
Yeah.
I don't, my personal opinion is I don't feel like it was a game that could have very easily gone the other way, and it would have been a fair
Hmm.
result either way for either group to
Yeah.
come away with it.
I noticed too, like that. One of my favorite players, Michael Kutsinzira. I mean, involved in both goals. Like, just a remarkable ball player. Like, Guy's tough to shut down, but yeah, I always I noticed I didn't get to watch it, but I noticed the score, and Washington and Lee is one of those where you're like, for whatever reason, right or wrong, I'm like, this should just 4-0 every game, like
Yeah, I mean they came
yeah,
into
you
they came into
know,
they put touchdowns up
yeah,
in the
yeah,
first to their quarterfinal and their semifinal.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it's definitely, they're capable, good attacking players. Again, our commitment to the way that we defensive third defend, I think is pretty good anyway. But
mm,
I didn't feel like that was going to be able to give us the best opportunity. I don't think we felt like that this year, that
yeah,
leaning on that. And so yeah, again, I think there was maybe the difference in this match why I mean, someone could disagree with me, but my honest belief is that it was a pretty back and forth match that we
yeah,
had. And again, you're talking about, I think we got some guys too, but much respect for Kutz and Zara.
yeah,
Sam Bass is another player that I
yeah. Sam
think was
Bass, another one.
fantastic for them. And
Yeah,
um, scored a pretty special goal. The first goal for them was a pretty special goal from their
yeah,
other, one of their top attacking
yeah.
players. So.
Um, I will say we drove past it on the way down to you guys on the way to South Carolina, and saw the sign, and I was like, oh, I should just pull in. I should just pull in for, but we were running late already, so I didn't realize you guys were that close to each other, relatively close to each other.
Yeah, there's a nice little obviously rivalry within our league. All the
Hmm.
teams. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
we talked about this last time, but like Hampton City and Randolph-Macon have intense rivalry in football,
yeah,
I think, as well as all the sports. Like, but between like Roanoke, W&L, and Lynchburg, there's different things in different sports. I think there's different things in other parts as well. I mean,
yeah,
our president is always seems to be interested after the W&L game. If
yeah, yeah.
President Maxey's greeted me before
Mm.
after we've won up there on the bus when we get back. Like, all right, yeah, our former president. So, yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's some things there with just our proximity to each other
yeah,
now, or
yeah,
away
yeah,
from each other, and
yeah,
the histories of all of the
yeah,
sports.
yeah,
It makes it
yeah,
exciting. I mean, I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
brilliant Division III
Yeah,
athletics as well.
yeah, at
And
its best, right? At its best,
yep.
that's it. Captures it right there. Um, all right, so you're my stat guy. You're the one when anybody says statistics, and I basically point them to you because I think of anything that I've seen, and other coaches may do this but have never shared with me sort of their results or their underlying data. And but what you do following a season to sort of capture statistically what you think your team's done is pretty remarkable. So maybe could you just at a very high level just talk a little bit about your use of statistics, and then if there's anything like you'd say you gleaned from that you gleaned from this year's statistics.
Yeah, I mean, we track a bunch of different things. The most would be like efficient shots efficient shots created in a
Mm-hmm.
match, and we track that for ourselves and our opponents throughout the year. And uh, that is like a calculation that we have like in-house based on
Mm-hmm.
the world's shot efficiency with
Mm-hmm.
someone that a friend of mine who's collected all of that. So those numbers typically don't like vary that much. Don't vary that much in terms of the efficiency of what type of goals are scored, like where they are and what type of like traffic is between you and the goal, and what zone you would
Mm-hmm.
score from. Um, I guess the bigger question and the more important question is how to get the ball into that area, and how you're doing that with purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
essentially, it ends up in the box, and box entries is the answer to that. And a
Mm-hmm.
million ways to do that, I guess, in the game of soccer. You could long throw it from midfield
Mm-hmm.
and run the risk of trying to find a knockdown in there or create chaos, or you could find it by way of 15 passes that moves the other team, and
Right.
um, it gets the ball into a high efficient scoring spot. So we track that. I'd say that's like one of the bigger ones. And then, we talked about this last time. That also helps us in defending, I think, as much as anything. So, like, kind of all these things that to be like intrinsically soccer, we would have numbers for them as far as like where to force a player, or like what kind of numbers to get in a certain area between the shooter and the ball, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
where we're like confident that an opponent could take shots from, where it would be, there's we could give up like 100 of shots in a season, but if they're from an area that score at like less than 1%,
Percent.
if defended properly, it's going to be goalkeeper error or
Yeah.
a deflection that gets it there. Um, we could be okay with that. So that's one thing that we track, and then we have some different things on uh, restart efficiency, which I don't think I'm
Mm-hmm.
as well versed at. Still learning more and more about it, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think there's a piece in college soccer that's important. And then the bigger ones would be like these critical factors. So we've tracked like like when the goals are scored, and in terms of, we call them critical moments, like when the
Mm-hmm.
goals are scored, and we
Yeah.
have ideas of 10 and 20 years of games, and then also
Yeah.
college soccer games, and then like how important like uh, shutouts are, obviously, or like
Mm-hmm.
consecutive goals, or first goals, things like that. So those are some of the things that we would track, and they pretty much meet the world's numbers as far as like tracking of other leagues as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So I'm going to ask you a question to opine on, and it's a theory of mine, not a theory. I have some evidence to it. Um, how I get dead balls. I think dead balls are different than corners, but I know a lot of teams place a premium on corner kicks as goal scoring opportunities. I I don't think corner kicks are as important as some may believe. Do you have any information or data that you collected on what you think are
So
the value of that of them are?
yeah, yeah,
Prove me right, in other words. That's all I'm saying. Prove me right.
yeah. I can go two ways with this. So, like, first other thing I'll say is there are people on the internet as well that do, and for world soccer, that know way, 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 way. So I could spit out a stat, and somebody could
Yeah,
come back at me and go, "That's not even what it
sure.
is." I got my source, who I trust, and that's done a lot of this research, and then I have what we have tracked here,
Mm-hmm.
for restarts, corner kicks, I've been told that somewhere like in the world, it's somewhere around uh, a highly efficient corner kick team would be scoring around like 12%. So like one out of every 10. And then a lower would be like around the 7% range. So
Mm-hmm.
you still are, scoring at one of those rates. I haven't done our
If
numbers
you're
for
good at it, if you're good at it, you would score 1 out of 10 corner kicks.
maybe a little higher than that. And
Maybe
if
a
you're
little
not
higher,
good at
whatever
it,
that, but
yeah.
roughly.
Yep.
Okay.
Um, And so our I haven't tracked our corner kicks this year specifically, that number, and I don't have our other numbers here, but
Mm-hmm.
we honestly have varied on either side of that, like
Mm-hmm.
here, like, but not far. So we've never been at like a one out of two corner kick we
Yeah.
score team since
Mm-hmm.
since I've been here, or since I've been in college soccer. Um, what I do think, what we, you know, this was a discussion in our office, and we had our other assistant coach was doing a lot of this fact finding at some points this season, but he had found that like you're actually not scoring on the first attempt at the ball on corner kicks anyway. Like the majority of the corner kicks that lead to goals are on the second ball in the
Mm-hmm.
box. So
Yeah.
like guy heads it back across, then he
Yeah.
finishes it. I feel like a lot of college soccer coaches may know that better than I do, because we were seeing that a ton this year.
Mm-hmm.
Just like float it to the back post, punch it back across, and now the second one is the one that scores. So
Yeah.
that was something that was interesting to me this season, that we kind of like looked at, because we talked about that first part of the season where we didn't come away with some of the bigger game results in our
Mm-hmm.
non-conference, and some of them came down to restarts. Catholic game was not one of them, but some of the other ones came down to restart goals one way or the other, and we were not scoring them. We were not
Hmm.
the recipients of them, and we were thinking, if all things are equal, what is going to be the difference here? And if we're
Yeah.
not executing, and we sort of found some more down the stretch, though we've never been like incredibly excellent at it. What I think it is so to your point, I don't think they score at a super high rate, but
Hmm.
um, for a team that's unable to get box entries in any other way, I think it still could come down to your most effective way to score off of a corner or a flank restart, which I would
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
find as something wide of the box, or
Yeah.
even in. I don't know. I haven't watched as many Division One games as I maybe used to, but at least in college soccer and Division Three, there's many teams that if they get fouled at midfield, are
That ball's
punting the
going
ball
in.
into the box, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
mayhem. And teams are good at creating chances off of that, and so. Um, yeah, sometimes with those, uh, there's been games where I'm like, yeah, don't foul around the 18 for sure. Like, hey,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
we want to keep our feet, we want to force them into bad shooting areas. But there's been some games that I've go, you can't foul anywhere in our half because that's going to be the best way that they're going to create a
Yeah.
box entry that could create problems for us.
Uh,
So I think it's about box entries, like the ability to get the ball into the dangerous zones
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
than it is like maybe specifically a corner kick.
Yeah. The it's interesting you say that because there is I call them out, and as much as it drives me nuts sometimes because it's again offends my sensibilities as what I think soccer should be done, how it should be done or played. Like there are teams, and I can call them out, that are just good at chaos, right? They get the ball in the box and bodies are flying,
Yeah, yeah,
balls bouncing, and there they are, bing, goal,
yep.
right? And they're like, that's what we wanted to do all along, right? And you see them playing for that, just get the ball into. It doesn't matter, like you said, long balls from midfield, long throws. I'm going to dump it into the box.
Yep.
Anything to create that 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 chaos. Um, you know, in your stats, one of the one things that jumped out at me that I was right, because usually the idea of statistics is you see like there's a pattern, there's some you know there's some correlation between one thing and another, and that's how you sort of extrapolate. But the stats that I saw on scoring first stunned me for how, I'll just say it, like at least in your case, right? And I gotta believe it's probably very similar across teams what scoring first does for a team. So maybe you could talk about that a little.
Yeah, like since we've been tracking it since I've been here at Roanoke, I tracked it at other schools as well, but this is the data from us since we've been tracking it here at Roanoke since 2013 when I became head coach. I think we're at like 83, 2 and 7. So 83 wins, 2 losses, and 7 ties if we score first in the game, which is it's crazy. It makes my head spin a little bit thinking about it. One of those 2 losses was this year, so it was against Virginia Wesleyan. So we're talking about like a regionally ranked
Yeah.
game. Had a great battle with them, sort of mid-season, early part of our conference season. Got a goal 20 minutes in, 25 minutes in, somewhere in the midway point of the first half, and ended up conceding 2 goals in the last like 7 to 8 minutes to lose 2-1. But um, uh, it's interesting that we've gone that long in again 83 wins, 2 losses, and 7 ties. If we get that first goal, I mean, I have some theories on it. I've given it a decent amount of thought over the year. I obviously always joke with people that I talked about. I'm not. We don't stop playing, and I don't stop coaching once we get the goal. But I, I think some of it has to do with like our ability with the ball. Like once you get a goal, the other team has to come and stretch you a little
Yeah.
bit. And if you're not playing in chaos in those moments,
Yeah.
then you can be on the front foot of the game. Okay, I think that's
Yeah.
one piece of it, and so I think we've been semi-successful at that. The second one is more a chaos piece. Like we talk about match management here like a lot, and So I'm using other people's errors in match management. We're watching games all over the country in college
Yeah.
soccer, different divisions, but mostly in Division Three, and going like, "Hey, this can happen. This is what we need to consider in our match management." You know,
Yeah.
I have a this includes clock stoppages late in games. It includes uh, uh, safety versus risk in certain
Uh-huh.
moments of
Yeah.
games and such. So I think that those are some things that we're well aware of, and I'm not saying that it's not impossible for us to blow a lead as we did in that match, but
Right.
generally speaking, if we get that first goal and get on the front foot with the match management knowledge that we have, I have one that when I was at Denver, we were playing, I believe it was Creighton, and I had a video of our goalkeeper with the ball with 5 seconds left in the game, and it hit their post before the
Yeah.
buzzer sounded. So I know you can get it from one end to the
Yeah.
other in 5 seconds, unless that scorekeeper's finger was like
Yeah.
slow. So it makes you go like the games are never over until the
Yeah.
horn goes, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's probably a bit of like maybe match management things that we are like constantly pushing them on in their like college soccer specific match management things,
Mm.
somewhat, and then also maybe like just like our ability to play on the front foot when a team has to stretch a little bit more. Those are the two things. But yeah, it's pretty incredible. I would imagine that number would still be very high. Maybe not as
Mm.
high as this for most programs if you get that
Mm.
first goal, and yeah, it was a hurtful second this year when we
Yeah.
dropped that game again. Some of it comes to this too. You know, you have that goal lead, and maybe this year more than maybe in the past, if you don't have the overtime, like depending on what people want to do, like the amount of like risks they're going to take to try to get
Yeah.
that point in league. So there's some moments when we're like they're throwing so many numbers forward, they're either going to score or we're going to have to get a
Yes.
second. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those
Yeah.
two things, and there's
Yeah.
not really like a coaching tactic that you can
No.
do
No.
at that moment. I mean, I was looking at our conference semifinal was a bit like that, even with a two-goal lead. Like, I felt we were in good control of the match against Hampton Sydney, but it's 0-0 at half, and we crack one open 1-0, and then we get a second. But even then, like the last 10 minutes of the game is just insanely scrappy because like it's like their numbers are so high, and
Mm.
again, unless you can make them pay through possessions in the end or counters that lead to chances or goals, more specifically, you're going to have to make some plays in your defensive third, and your goalkeeper is probably going to have to make a play, and you're probably going to have to defend some restarts and shots. So.
Yeah. The I, I'm it, it would be interesting for me to look at so a team like Roanoke who likes to possess the ball, scoring that first goal, how important it is, right? Because what do you think? Your confidence goes up. The other team has to come out of whatever defensive posture that they were contemplating because they got to get another goal. So that spreads out space. If you are into possession, how much easier it is to sort of dictate the game. I'd be curious about those teams that sort of, you know, it's chaos 24/7 with them, right? Like where they're not so concerned about possession. Their idea is how do you get it up top? How do you battle it out? And I wonder if that would still hold for them because I always find that those teams don't have a their strategy for game management is scoring a second goal and a third goal and a fourth goal on you. And not so worried about Sheldon can say hi. He's
You're getting a shout out.
yeah, I'd be curious to just statistically look at that because that would, like I said, I think I always say this is my thing, and this is a terrible analogy, but that's the way I do it. It's like when you can get a soccer game to break out, the team that knows how to possess the ball better is going to win. And I think usually what ends up happening is in a chaos game, it's harder for the team with possession, right? Who likes possession because they're not accustomed to the chaos. And then if they do score, so if you do score, you sort of are able to settle into the way you like to play.
Yeah, I think there's definitely
Again, that's a theory of mine.
there's definitely something to that, and I mean, I think that the maybe issue against that is that the Division three, college soccer is a chaos game in general. Like,
Yeah,
still the
yeah,
majority is a chaos game. I mean, even somebody who feels that they're not and prides
yeah,
themselves on it, you're still playing in transition for most
yeah,
of the moments. I mean,
yeah.
just with the way that it is and the subbing and the pressing that you can have, and um, yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, the other thing is like, a team that's very defensively organized and is willing to get numbers behind the ball at this level, it's hard to get a goal on the run of play against them. Like,
Yeah.
I'll take that. Stevens in the semifinal. Again, I don't know a ton about any of those teams. I hadn't seen anybody but Mary Wash play maybe more than once on the season.
Yep.
I thought Chicago was fantastic. Congrats to
Yeah.
them on the championship. I thought it was well deserved based on what I saw in the semifinals of the four teams. But like, Stevens' like commitment to defending. I don't know if this is how they always are. If Chicago kind of pushed them into it, but it's like, how are they going to get a goal? And this is even with them creating some chances. How are they
Yeah.
going to get a goal with
Yeah.
their like commitment and structure, like behind the ball? And you go in those games, like for us, even if we're on that other side, the Chicago side of it, we're like, it might have to come in a restart,
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
not going to have the number advantage
Yeah.
potentially in the box where they're just going to have bodies and numbers there and not allow us to even get the ball there to begin with. So I think there is something to that as well. Like, you can commit to defending, but once the goal is scored, you have to kind of change the shell. If you are committed to defending, and you can kind of hang in any type of game really.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well, I think like I'm gonna get a lot of stick for this. I'll get like 2 emails about it, but like Williams' commitment to defending is what got them to where they were, and yeah, they eked out goals. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying. I mean, they were much better in the tournament than they were during the regular season in terms of getting goals, right
yeah,
and that so like that works. But then you start to want there is that like, hey, your defensive posture is awesome. Like, I'm not taking anything away. But even against Chicago, there were moments where it's like, yeah, they might have a look at goal, but you're like, where are you going to score?
yeah, yeah,
Because you're so. And Stevens is the perfect. That game against Chicago, I think they were forced into it, to be honest with you. I've seen them a few times, and
I
they
think
do
they,
like to own the ball a little bit
yeah,
more, and they'd like to get out forward, and they like to get on the attack. They like to get with all of those things. But I just think Chicago was too tall of an order. Once they got rolling in that second half, like there wasn't anything Stevens was going to be able to do except for defend.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I understand maybe they had a top player, attacking player
Yeah,
that kind of caught an injury as well. So,
yeah,
that changes things. And that is the other thing. I mean, if you've got a 10 plus goal scorer
yeah.
in
Who's out?
in your
Yeah,
group at any point, you can
yeah,
threaten. And it wasn't that, 15 minutes left. I'm going, Stevens can take this game.
yeah.
It would be
Oh, sure.
great college soccer game.
Yep,
They threatened enough when they had moments,
yep,
but then at the same time, again, when you just look at like efficient chances created,
yeah,
um, yeah, it's just I thought their structure was good defensively, and
yeah,
probably would like to threaten more. But Chicago again, very good as
yeah.
well.
All right, last question or last observation from your stats, and then I'll let you get on with your day. Or there's a in your stats book that you sent me. It's quoted. We were better offensively and defensively in a 3-5-2 versus a 4-3-3. Maybe we could talk about that a little.
Yeah, I mean that was what the systematic change shift that I alluded to earlier in conversation, and essentially we had played out of like a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 last year,
Yeah.
subsequent years, and sort of in the spring last year flirted with this 3-5-2. It seems to be a trend a bit this year. I saw more of them on the other side, opponents than I've seen in years, and so but we really didn't implore it unless we were chasing a game
Hmm.
until maybe about midway through our season. And, our stat numbers are crazy once we got to it. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
still coming up with some whys. I think personnel wise, it matched our guys a little bit better. We got a guy really cooking up top. Harrison Cross ended up getting the rookie of the year for our conference,
Hmm.
scored a majority of his goals in that second half. I think some of our other attacking players were able to support the system a little bit better. But I think we scored 31 goals, and 26 of them were in the 3-5-2, and we played about the same amount of games in minutes in the two systems throughout the season.
Wow.
So I believe 6 for the other system. Now
Hmm.
there are restart goals sprinkled in there as well. Yeah, and that was just an observation that I got to deal with, just to figure out, like, again, what sort of system fits our personnel best, and
Hmm.
for this year, that's what it was. And once we got to it, I felt that we were a good team prior, but we were a lot better of a team once we moved to it. And I think the players, probably half buy into something a little different when goals aren't going in or results aren't coming sort of early in some of those big games, and then half it fits our players, personnel wise, a little bit better. And
Yeah.
so yeah, between the two things, that was where that came from, and that's where how the stats played out. It's just we just
Yeah.
scored more and conceded less once we got there. So yeah.
That's interesting. I've been saying for a while that I don't think 4-3-3 is old, but I do think 4-3-3 has been used by a lot of people and a lot of coaches. And I almost think like you start, it's time, people are starting to think of different ways to adapt to a game instead of necessarily the 4-3-3. I'm a fan of 3-5-2 just because I just think I like the idea of outnumbering guys in the midfield. Like it's hard. It always strikes me as hard watching the games. Like I don't think it's a thing. I just think it's hard for teams to understand how important it is that you always want to be a man up in sections of the field, and it's hard to do, right? Like you're
Yeah.
running and you're trying to support and all that stuff. Whereas when you get a 3-5-2, you sort of have that natural balance of guys throughout the field and closer to the goal, obviously, and all that. So
Yeah, I think that's what it was for us. I mean, like, in terms of like creation of overloads to create space to sort of get the ball where you want to get it. Um, Essentially, I think the most beneficial one for us was like between our two forwards and like whoever was playing sort of our higher 10 role or like attacking midfielder role, was like when we got into a moment. And I think we scored half our goals. We also tracked like where the goals come from, and like half of them were in
mm-hmm.
of the goals in the run of play. Half of them were in transition, and half of them would be like what I just generically called the build, which would be transitionally be like 3 passes or less after we win a ball, and generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, like 40 to 60 yards from goal. Like
Yeah,
we've pressed to score or create
yeah,
the efficient shot versus like through our movement and shifting of the other group to combine to
yeah,
create the chance. So we scored in the run of play. Some in the transitional moment, some in the run of play. But either way, it was like just the numbers right in that central goal scoring area. Like, so even if
it's
we arrived wide with the ball, it was like one more guy than we would have had usually, or two more
yeah,
guys than we would have usually, or if we turn the team over, like in like our. I mean, I got some good efficient chance creation clips both that went to goals and also missed chances where we're able to turn them over, and like we had a high target that was right there and another guy running off and pushing
yeah,
the back line. So I just think like the numbers
yep,
for us, like the numbers centrally helped us to just be threatening both when we turned teams over as well as when we created some sort of overload or space in the
yeah,
wide areas.
yeah,
Whereas for our group with the one early in the season in the 4-3-3, it was like getting our attacking central midfielder, our 10, or if we were playing like with 10 and 8, like getting them
yeah,
there to join, or the weak side wing. It's just a tall order
yeah,
sometimes. At least
yeah,
that's what it
yeah,
was for us. So
yeah, yeah. Like I said, it's just hard, and again, I think it's a lot of teams. It's just hard to get the numbers forward necessary to get a sustained attack effectively, and so. All right, Coach. Hey, I want to thank you for this. Really do appreciate it. Really enjoyed talking to you. Again, it was great meeting you in person. And this was great. We'll have to connect again at some point and talk some more stats.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime, I'm always open to it. I appreciate it again what you're doing for promotion of the Division III game, especially. And it's good to meet you in person. And all the best with the rest of the podcasts and the coaches.
Thank you.
And, so anytime.
Thanks. And tell Sheldon the next time I see him at PDA, I will buy him a cup of coffee.
Wasn't sleeping under a tree, was he? He was watching the game, right?
He was like, No, he was goofing around somewhere, like
this guy. I mean, these guys. Credit all of these guys.
I saw him,
credit all these guys.
Yeah.
The assistant coaches at this level, man, these guys are grinding, and he to be fair, he comes down with me to South Carolina. We watch the Final Four semifinals here and do our role as hosts. We jump in the car after the second game's over, drive to Greer, South Carolina, recruit there for 2 days. We come back Saturday night. He's got to wake up Sunday morning, 4 a.m. and drive to Williamsburg to coach his club team in another recruiting event Sunday for an 8 a.m. kickoff, and then stays and recruits that event. So, credit to these guys. They're working hard.
That's why you pay him all the money you do, right? That's the big bucks. That's the big bucks. Actually, I saw him as well. He watched one of our games there, and I should have said hello, but there were 75 coaches around, and I think he was huddled up with a bunch of your enemies on the fields. He was talking to those guys. So
unfortunately for me, I got about 6 former players that are assistants or head coaches at other colleges now, and several of them in my league. And to be fair,
that doesn't help.
Tournament this year, I had to face Patrick Bain, was the associate head coach at Hampton Sydney, is a former Roanoke player, great player here. Actually, you could probably see his picture or feet on a picture above me right there. And then Fortune Sabanda was a fantastic player here at Roanoke, and he is assistant at Bridgewater College. So the first 2 rounds of the tournament, I'm facing former players, and we have another one, Polani Maloshwa, who's at Lynchburg as an assistant. If we had faced them in the final, it would have been a 3-for-3 with that. So I
think you gotta have some revolving door policy. If you have to wait 5 years before you can come back into the league once you graduate,
I would be for that vote for sure.
All right, Coach. Again, thanks a lot. Really do appreciate it.
All right.
If you like this show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also find me on anti-social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks. This is a message from my Chief Marketing Officer. I think this keeps him happy.